You ever have one of those moments where you think, surely this can't get any dumber, and then life just grabs a shovel and digs you a brand new basement? That was me, standing barefoot in my kitchen, mug in hand, watching the heaviest snow I'd seen in 2 decades come down sideways over Riverside Meadows, Iowa. I'd barely been here 8 months, still felt like the new kid in town. And let me tell you, my dream of quiet suburban living? Yeah, that was about to take a hit straight to the rear fender. So there I was, enjoying the view, wide-out conditions, snowbanks swallowing up mailboxes, when out of nowhere, this god-awful metallic screech cuts through the storm. Not the soft, peaceful thump of snow sliding off a roof, but the unmistakable sound of bumper meeting bumper. My stomach dropped before I even got to the window. I just knew, and sure enough, there she was. Patricia Crowley, HOA president, moral overlord, and terror of all things moderately out of line, had just plowed her tank of an SUV right into my parked sedan. On my own damn driveway. I'm Stephen Randolph, by the way, new to Riverside Meadows, new to HOA madness, and at that moment, new to the sensation of snow-soaked slippers squishing beneath my feet as I bolted outside, adrenaline and disbelief leading the charge. Patricia was already marching across the property line, bundled in a puffy coat that made her look like some kind of angry, stay-puffed marshmallow. Her SUV, engine still growling, sat nose to tail with my poor sedan, kissing its rear quarter like they were on a first date gone wrong. "Mr. Randolph," she barked, voice slicing through the wind and the falling snow, cheeks flushed beet red. Couldn't tell if it was rage or windburn, probably both. "Your vehicle is blocking the proper flow of traffic." I blinked, looked at my sedan, dead center of my driveway, a good 15, maybe 20 feet from the street. I looked at her SUV, now halfway into my yard, clearly having skidded right off the icy road. "Patricia," I started, keeping my tone calm, "you just hit my car on my own driveway." She didn't skip a beat. "Your car should not have been there," she declared, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The HOA regulations clearly state that during inclement weather, all residents must take reasonable precautions to prevent traffic hazards. Now, I'd dealt with Patricia before, warnings about my garbage can sitting out too long, citations for mailbox paint not being the right shade of white, a whole formal letter about an unapproved bird feeder. But this was next level. I told her again, as politely as I could muster, that my car was parked on my own property, far from the street, just like every other day. But Patricia, she was already tapping at her phone, snowflakes gathering in her over-bleached hair, filming evidence for whatever tribunal she thought she was running. "You'll be receiving a citation," she announced, "for creating a hazardous condition during a weather emergency." I trudged down the driveway, my feet fully numb by now, and got a closer look at the damage. Her bumper had left a nasty dent and a deep scar of missing paint on my car, bits of red taillight peppered across the snow. "Patricia, you need to give me your insurance info. You have my parked car." She never broke stride, still filming. "I didn't know such thing. Your vehicle was improperly positioned, and in attempting to navigate the hazardous conditions you created, my vehicle came into contact with yours. This is entirely your fault." For a second, I just stared. The audacity was almost impressive. "You cannot be serious," I said. "Oh, I am," she fired back. "And I'll be bringing this to the HOA board at our emergency meeting tonight. We're convening to discuss snow removal protocols, and your disregard for community safety will be addressed." I told her flat out, "There's no HOA rule about parking on my own driveway. I'd read the covenant." Twice. She rolled her eyes and said I must have misunderstood. Then she stopped filming and told me to show up at the board meeting at 7 o'clock sharp to explain myself. That's when I got a little less polite. "I'm not explaining anything. You hit my car. Give me your insurance, or I'm calling the police." Her expression soured, eyes narrowing like a cornered cat. "You wouldn't dare involve outside authorities in HOA business. That's a direct violation of our bylaws." I had to laugh. Those bylaws don't override the law. This is a traffic accident. You have to provide insurance info. She huffed herself up. She's maybe 5'3", but you'd have thought she was 10 feet tall in that moment. then stomped over to her car, dug through the glove compartment, and shoved her insurance card at me like it was some kind of grenade. I snapped a photo with my nearly dead phone, my hands shaking from the cold and pure frustration. "I'll also need your driver's license," I said. "Absolutely not," she snapped. "You have my insurance. That's sufficient." It's actually not. In Iowa, we're required to exchange licenses. This was not an accident. This was a hazardous condition you created, she hissed, but I was already dialing the non-emergency police line. That's when Patricia went for my phone, literally lunged at me, grabbing for it. I stepped back, slipped on the ice, and went down hard, smacking my tailbone. My phone tumbled into the snow. Patricia stood over me, breath steaming, telling me I was making a terrible mistake, that the board would hear about my aggressive behavior. Something in me snapped, not into anger, but into crystal clear resolve. I'd had enough. "Get off my property," I said, steady as I could. She drew herself up, full righteous fury, but I repeated myself. "I don't care if you're the governor. Get off my property." She spun on her heel, stomped to her SUV, and peeled out, nearly taking out a mailbox in the process. I lay there for a second, soaking wet, back throbbing, just letting it all sink in. Then I got up, found my phone, miraculously still working at 3%, and shuffled inside, where I swapped out my clothes and sat with a cup of coffee, plotting my next move. The smart play, I knew, would have been to call the cops right then, but I needed to think and document. So I bundled up, went back out with a proper coat and boots, and took photos, close-ups of the dent, tire tracks showing Patricia's SUV had definitely crossed the property line, the whole scene preserved in slushy, icy detail. That's when Rick Manning, my neighbor from across the street, trudged over. Rick, retired firefighter, zero patience for HOA nonsense, looked me over and asked if I was okay. I explained what happened, told him Patricia blamed me for her own lousy driving. Rick shook his head and laughed. "She's a piece of work, that one. You file a report yet?" I told him she tried to stop me. Rick wasn't surprised. He told me about the emergency HOA meeting tonight, something about new snow removal fees, and that I was apparently on the agenda for creating a hazard. Rick rolled his eyes. "She's gone power mad since taking over. Brenda just follows orders, and Todd, well, she's got something on him. Nobody knows what, but he votes her way every time." Back inside, I called the police non-emergency line. Dispatcher said an officer would swing by, but with the storm, it might be a while. While I waited, I started digging through Iowa's HOA laws, really reading them this time. Turns out, HOAs have a lot of power, but there are limits. They can't override state law. They can't invent penalties on a whim. And they can't enforce rules that aren't actually in the covenant. So I started reviewing every citation and fine Patricia had ever sent me. Not a single one referenced an actual section of the covenant. Just community standards and board policy, neither of which existed in writing. Garbage can? Covenant just said, remove same day. Paint color? Kept in good repair. Bird feeder? Never mentioned. Patricia had been making up rules as she went, banking on nobody pushing back. I was so deep in this paperwork, I almost missed the knock at the door. Officer Martinez, mid-30s, tired eyes, looked like she'd been out in the cold for hours, stood there. I let her in, explained everything, showed her photos, the whole story. She took notes, checked out the scene, and when she came back in, she laid it out straight. "So Miss Crowley hit your car, on your property, and claims it's your fault?" "Yep. And she tried to stop me from calling you. Knocked me over, sort of." She grabbed at my phone. I slipped, hit the ice. Officer Martinez wrote it all up, said the physical evidence was clear. Patricia was at fault. Her insurance would have to cover the damage. As for the assault, harder to prove. No direct contact, just a slip. I told her I mainly wanted the accident on the record. She handed me the paperwork, recommended I call my insurance right away. Before she left, she said something that stuck with me. "You know, people like that, they get away with it because folks are afraid to push back. But you did everything right." I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering every scrap of documentation I could. Printouts of the covenant, the Iowa law, Patricia's emails, Rick's stories, you name it. I even drafted a formal complaint about her behavior. By 6:30, the snow finally quit. I bundled up, drove slow to the community center, where, surprise, the parking lot had been freshly plowed by the same company Patricia's husband conveniently owned. Inside, the room was packed with cold, grumpy neighbors. Rick and his wife waved me over. The board came in, Patricia, Brenda, Todd, and Patricia banged that oversized gavel of hers like she was presiding over the Supreme Court. She droned on about community safety and property values for 10 minutes, all vagueness and bluster. Finally, she got to the point. This morning, a resident's reckless behavior created a hazard and led to a collision. All eyes swung to me. Mr. Randolph has been repeatedly warned, Patricia continued, and now has involved outside authorities in what should have been an internal matter. Silence. Awkward, confused silence. Finally, Jerry Parker from 2 streets over raised his hand. If there was a car accident, aren't you supposed to call the police? Patricia's jaw locked tight. That would be the case in a normal accident. However, this incident occurred within HOA jurisdiction and should have been handled. That's when I stood up. With all due respect, Patricia, Iowa state law says otherwise. HOAs can't override state traffic laws. My car was parked legally on my own driveway. You hit it. You try to stop me from reporting it. And for months, you've been issuing bogus citations that don't match anything in the covenant. I pulled out my stack of paperwork. Here's the accident report. Here's the law. Here's every warning and citation I've ever gotten. Not a single one cites a real rule. A murmur ran through the crowd. Rick piped up. He's right, you know. I got cited for my Christmas lights being up too long. Show me where that's in the rules. For the first time, Patricia looked rattled. Brenda stared at her hands. Todd looked like he wanted to be anywhere but there. I finished. We deserve transparency and fairness, not intimidation. And I'm officially filing a complaint with the state HOA board. There was this moment, almost a collective exhale, where it felt like the entire room had woken up from a bad dream. Other neighbors started nodding, sharing their own stories, piling on. Patricia tried to regain control, banging her gavel again, but the spell was broken. The meeting turned into a reckoning, folks demanding answers, copies of the rules, a vote on Patricia's leadership. By the end, it was clear the tides had turned. I walked out of that meeting into the cold night air, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sure, my back still ached and my car was dented, but justice, however small, had been served. Patricia's reign was over, or at the very least, she'd have to follow the same rules as the rest of us. And, as I trudged through the snow, I realized something. Power only lasts as long as folks let themselves be bullied. The moment you stand up, even if your voice shakes or your hands are cold, things start to change. Sometimes all it takes is one good, hard look at the rules and a willingness to say enough. So here's what I wonder, and maybe you've got your own take. Where's the line between keeping order and abusing power? When does a little authority become a hammer that flattens everyone who disagrees? Ever had to stand up to someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them? Or have you ever just said enough, even if you were scared stiff? Drop your stories down below. Tell me about your own HOA nightmares or that time you pushed back and made a difference. Justice, real justice, only happens when regular folks refuse to get pushed around. And that, my friend, is a lesson worth remembering, no matter how deep the snow.